Urgent Somsujuaks, and this is Russia studied a captured Leo 2AF5 and compared with its T-90M. Here are the results. Vacha Binko's battlegrounds. Yeah, T-90M, their main battle tank, apparently, not the T-14, which they don't have much of it. T-14 is the advanced version of it. Every, like criticism I've heard of T-14 is usually like, oh, they don't have it. Not that it's not good or not working. Because certain things T-14 has this kind of like a dome type defense and shit. Similar thing Abrams X showed, which was a concept. They're not actually making it. Apparently not a Russian either, because there are not many T-14. So they only have T-90M as their main battle tank. So they compared it with Leo 2. German one, right? Yeah, German one. So Russia is giving the result. Like, okay, it's going to be interesting. So let's watch it. Remember, if you like my reaction, don't forget and subscribe. So I know which type of videos to react to more. I like watching videos like this. I mean, obviously this is a result from Russia. Like how unbiased it's gonna be, who knows? But it's like, measuring two different tech from a proper government, not some expert who assumes things. No, it's a government results apparently. So let's watch it.
In spring of 2022, 38th Research and Testing Institute of Armored Armament and Equipment, Russia's only such testing organization within its Ministry of Defense, released a bulletin. Within, they published results of their analysis of several tanks captured in Ukraine. Among those, the highest profile one is certainly Leopard 2A5. It was evaluated in areas of fire control and sights, ammunition handling, the engine and transmission. The bulletin also contains a brief comparison with the Russian-owned T-90M tank, one of the most modern tanks Russia uses, alongside a recommendation of what solutions Russian future tanks should implement. This video will mostly stick to the comparison points presented in the report, rather than expand upon the comparison with its own analysis. The report said Leo 2A5 in question was captured in 2024 after being disabled by a mine and a heat warhead hit in the turret. Images provided are from the bulletin report. Curiously, the images seem to show Leo 2A6, not the A5. It was never publicly disclosed that Germany sent the A5 to Ukraine. Anyway, the Leo 2A5 variant is the first Leo variant with the characteristic-looking wedge-shaped armor, though it had other modifications as well. It entered service with the German army in 1995. Basically, it's a 30-year-old tank now. Of course, the exact vehicle used in Ukraine did see some minor modifications. In comparison, the T-90M was first accepted into Russian service in 2021. Ammunition load of the Leo 2's main gun is 42 rounds, divided in two sections, for immediate use for the loader and for longer-term storage. The gun...
Yeah, it doesn't bode well that you're comparing decades-old tank with your latest one. I would assume T-90M is old, but no, it's like it's recent one. Like, okay, but then again, it's just improvement of the old. What was it, T-80? The T-90M is just like kind of like improvement of the old one, right? They just like renamed it.
Is loaded manually, yielding a total crew of 4 people. T-90M carries 43 rounds, also divided in sections. The gun is loaded by an autoloader, so the tank holds a smaller crew than Leo 2. Curiously, the report compares, quote, technical rate of fire, end quote, for the main gun, and gives the T-90M 8 rounds per minute, which is a well-known figure for the autoloader, but saddles the Leo 2 with just 6 rounds per minute. Being loaded manually, there is really no one typical fire rate for Leo 2. In this one Leo 2 training video, one can observe a fire rate of 12 to 15 rounds per minute. Of course, in real war conditions, loading would likely be a bit slower, and get progressively even slower as the loader gets more tired. So something like 8 to 12 rounds per minute should be more relevant to Leo 2. Who knows how the Russian report got to their figure, but later on it mentions target tracking system in conjunction with fire rate, so maybe fire rate tests involved attacking multiple targets in different settings. Anyway, ammo stored for the main gun is of 2 types: armor-piercing fin-stabilized arrows and high-explosive anti-tank rounds.
It always surprises me that Russia uses autoloaders while the European and Americans don't. Because auto loading you think is more advanced than the manual loading. Why not? And Russia always has this like, okay, we might not have the most cutting edge technology, but we make things work. Look at that AK-47 and things. While the counterpart is more, let's just say, more technical. That's what Germany is. Right? German engineering, what that is, like more complicated engineering. Do you think like auto loading would be Germany or like a NATO side thing rather than Russia side? But it's opposite, which is always surprising. And surprising is Russia can actually make it work. Do you think that that thing jams and like screws up all the time?
In comparison, the T-90 holds 4 types: the APFSDS and heat, like the Leo, but also long-range maneuverable laser-guided rounds with heat warheads, and general-purpose high-explosive rounds. Effective firing range of the APFSDS rounds was given in the report as 2200 meters for the Leo A5 and 2500 meters for the T-90M. The report also credited T-90M with being able to detonate its high-explosive round remotely, possibly for airbursts. Leo 2 isn't credited with that ability, but older Leo 2s didn't really even carry high-explosive rounds. Rheinmetall developed a programmable high-explosive round for its Leo 2 gun in mid-2010s, but it's plausible the A5s are not using it. The fire control on Leo 2 is done using a ballistic computer, much like one in T-90M. When firing at a moving target, many variables are calculated, not just the type of the round fired, crosswind, the air and round temperature, but also angular velocities of the target and the tank itself. Gunner's sight in the Leo 2 has stabilization in 2 planes. The sight includes a thermal imaging and optical channel and a laser rangefinder. The latter is limited to distances of just under 10 kilometers. The report credits Leo with a slightly worse preparation time to first shot, 12 seconds versus 11 seconds for the T-90M. No details were given about what processes were included to get to said figures. The thermal imaging channel on Leo 2 has 2 magnification modes.
I mean, I know in real combat, every second counts, but like a lot of like data is just like marginally better, like 1 second difference when it comes to like 12 versus 11, right? 2500 instead of 2200. Like, okay, I guess that matters in a very specific scenario, but still it's very close.
A 4 and a 12-fold one. To operate properly, the thermal imager must be cooled to almost minus 200 degrees Celsius. Said cooling process requires 15 minutes upon activation. The report also claims the thermal imaging channel enables observation in nighttime conditions at ranges of up to 3000 meters. Later on in the report, it is clarified said distance refers to both detection and identification range of a tank-type target. The report says T-90M's sight enables the same at 3300 meters. Now, as a comment, all that's not strange as Leo 2 A5 should have an early second-generation thermal sensor for their commander, while the Russian tank uses a bit more advanced French technology-based sensor from the mid-2000s. It wasn't until Leo 2 A7 in the mid-2010s that Leo 2s got a third-generation thermal sight. The Russian report goes on saying that after studying Leo 2's features and armament design, no fundamentally new design solutions of interest were identified to be recommended for enhancing the firepower of future Russian tanks. Moving on to the power plant, the report mentions Leo 2 uses a 12-cylinder diesel engine, which maxes out in power output at 2600 RPM, yielding 1500 horsepower. The engine comes in a larger power unit monoblock, coupled with transmission for easier replacement. The report compares the T-90M unfavorably, saying that its power plant yields 22 horsepower per ton, compared to Leo 2's 23 horsepower per ton. Total combat weight tonnage, of course, is listed as higher for the Leo 2, at 65 versus 52 metric tons. Though that too is strange.
I mean, come on, engine is the one thing they better be doing well. I mean, yeah, that just makes sense.
As Leo 2A5 is cited to weigh 62 metric tons by its manufacturer when combat equipped. 3 tons is a huge difference, so it's unknown how the Russians got there. Then again, Russia's own Uralvagon Zavod cites 48 tons for the T-90M, probably empty. It's possible that all the era armor, fuel and ammo do add 4 tons to the tank's weight. The report, however, notes a drawback for the Leo 2's engine. It produces a lot of heat, and when the ambient temperature exceeds 35 degrees Celsius, the engine self-limits the output to just 900 horsepower, so it doesn't overheat. The T90 isn't mentioned, but one can deduce it doesn't have such overheating problems, or they are not as pronounced. Leo 2 uses a hydromechanical transmission providing 4 forward and 2 reverse gears, enabling higher speeds than the T90. Specifically, maximum forward speed for the Leo 2 is listed at 70 km per hour, while the same for T90 is listed at 62 km per hour. But the more damning issue for the T90 is maximum reverse speed. The report lists 30 km per hour for Leo versus just, quote, 5 to 10 for domestic tanks. The reverse speed can sometimes come in handy during combat maneuvers, where the tank is retreating while in combat.
Sometimes. Okay. I can think a lot of scenarios where like reverse speed is really important. I'm pretty sure even movies shows like tank suddenly reversing when it can't and it just explodes. The reversing is probably important for maneuvering in a lot of instances, obviously.
Combat, and is keeping its most armored side facing the enemy. The report also cites poor range for the Leo 2, which is a function of fuel consumption and amount of fuel carried. The report states 400 km for Leo versus 550 km for T-90M. Leo 2 isn't a very fuel-efficient tank, and the given figure may be even a bit more realistic than the Leo 2 maker's advertised figure of 450 km crossed on a single fuel tank. The report goes in more detail on some aspects like the tank's tracks, but then concludes that the engine, transmission and running gear of the Leo 2A5 use well-known design solutions that have already been applied in domestic vehicles, implying there is nothing new to be learned from them. Report's comparison table also contains several lines where it lists.
Man, Russia is great and all that, but come on, man, really, Germany's engine isn't that great? I mean, obviously this is like a Russian report. It's not gonna be unbiased, let's be honest. But then again, like they have to like stay close to truth somewhat. Otherwise, like, what's the point of this? But I don't know, man. Right? Like, it's German engine, right? Rheinmetall. Like, come on, like, really, it's one thing they can do really well.
Lists subsystems that the T-90M has present or available as an option, while the Leo A5 model used in Ukraine doesn't. That's not really an apples-to-apples comparison, as the Leo family also offers various submodules and options. It's just that those second-hand Leo 2 that Ukraine got did not have them. Thus, the T-90M
That is true, like the Leo 2s that they capture might not be so good. It's already old tank, like you said, multiple decade old. Yeah, and the one they got, it's not really that upgraded or something. Yeah, makes sense.
Listed as having a remotely controlled roof-mounted machine gun, a dynamic protection kit, and urban combat protection kit, as well as a signature reduction kit and drone control jammer, all of which the old A5 isn't credited with. The report ends with a few notes on areas where T-90M outperforms the Leo 2A5, mostly repeating previous findings. When it comes to firepower, key points listed are greater detection and identification range, both for commander and gunner in night conditions. Ability of the T-90M to use a 5,000 meter range guided weapon system, a class of weapon that the Leo 2 doesn't use. Ability of the T-90M to use remote detonating high explosive shells, which offer enhanced area of effect and damage versus personnel. Such a feature was found absent on the Leo A5 variant. Finally, the T-90M is said to have quicker preparation for firing the first shot, as well as a higher fire rate due to the use of automatic loader and target tracking system. The whole report is incredibly light on protection details and mentions only the following right at its end: that the T-90M outperforms the Leo 2 in protection of its frontal area against tandem warhead anti-tank missiles. It says that's due to the Relic dynamic protection system. The T-90M is also credited with an option to install an active protection system for all-around defense against various anti-tank threats. Again, that's something that the A5 doesn't have as it's old, but newer Leo 2 variants like A7 and A8 do have said option. And that's all, folks. All this comparison is still a handy piece of info, especially when coming from Russia itself.
Yeah, that's what I mean. Like, it might not be really unbiased, but it's still going to be somewhat close because otherwise, what's the point of doing this? Right? So, yeah, and they're comparing A5s and like now there's like A8 version and shit. So, this is not the great version of Leo because why would they give that to Ukraine? They would need it, right, for their defense. So, yeah, but even then, like, engine thing, I don't know, man. Like, engine overheating, all that. Like, I'm not saying German engineering doesn't have a problem, but come on, really? Russian engines are, like more stable than the German one? I don't know. But yeah, alright, well, that was Russia studies a captured Leo 2 in comparison with T-90M. If you like my reaction, don't forget, like, subscribe, and I'll see you next time.